in lieu of Truth and Reconciliation here in Canada, that I am coming to you from the hunting lands of many Indigenous groups. No Indigenous groups actually settled here, but there was a lot of hunting here. And I am honored that they have kept this land safe and sacred for myself to be able to live, work, and play here. So I'm going to talk a little bit different than I usually do. The last few years, my research has been on cultural differences and making sure that there's inclusive care for different cultural groups. And what I have found in the last few years is that teaching and focusing on the culture is great to have it in the curriculum. But if we peel back all those layers of why we do this and why we're here, and go back to, you know, the basic, it really is all about end of life and death being a personal experience. And I was just reflecting this morning on how when I teach, I feel like I'm always going back saying, like, for example, in the Métis Nation, there's certain protocols and certain things that happen. But I always go back to the students and say, but don't assume that, because every death is unique. Every death is individual. And that's kind of where I'm going a little bit today. So it's a little bit different than I usually do. And I should introduce myself, I guess. I'm just blabbing. So I'm Jennifer Mallmes. I am the creator of the End of Life Doula program, the Indigenous End of Life Doula, and now the Métis program at Douglas College in Canada. I am also co-creator of the Grief and Bereavement program at Douglas College and the Seniors Care program at Douglas College. I am also the co-founder of the End of Life Doula Association of Canada. And I'm very honored to see some of the students here and some of the teachers from the End of Life Doula program here today. So it's great that you're here. And I guess that's it. I am in Canada. I live in Christina Lake, just a little community of 2,000 people. So it's quite rural, and that brings up a whole nother area of end-of-life care and how to get appropriate and inclusive end-of-life care.
Jennifer, sorry to interrupt. Your slides are still, you haven't started the presentation, so we can see your slides, but can you put them into just from beginning there in the upper corner?
It's not doing anything for me. How about, did it switch?
Well, we see your PowerPoint presentation, all of the slides. So if you if you press from beginning.
I did that. See? It's not working.
Okay, well then maybe you can just make the slide itself bigger if you're not able to go into presenter mode. If you just create enlarge the slides. Yeah, there. That will be great. Yeah. Great.
All right, let's see if that's gonna work.
Yeah,
sorry,
no problem. No, that's fine. We're good.
It gives me an option to present in Teams, but not in any other form. Okay. All right, I'm just gonna start then before I run out of time. So I've been working in end-of-life care for about 27, 28 years now. And for me, I started in nursing school thinking that I was going to do end-of-life care in nursing school. And on my first day of my first practicum, I had a lady die in my arms. And at the end, when she was there and I was there with her, she didn't ask for medication. She didn't ask for, you know, anything that was medical. She asked if I would brush her hair. And I did, unknowing that she was going to pass at that time. And then when I was done, she said, "Thank you." And then she died. And for me, that really sparked something in me to want to do more, to want to do better. And I began doing palliative home care. And after I heard about this cool thing that was happening with end-of-life doulas back in mid 2000s, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I've been calling myself an end-of-life doula since about 2010, but doing this work for a lot longer. And I just learned in over the years and in that moment that end-of-life care is not some sort of checklist, you know, the palliative performance scale, or have we done this, and this, because it is really shaped by each person's values and their beliefs and their culture and the circumstances and the environment. It's not a one size fits all. So I may say some things today that might rock the boat a little bit, but that's what I like to do. If anybody knows, I do everything like that. Last year I was giving my presentation, my appendix burst while I was giving it. You know, I don't do things lightly. I always go out with a big bang, so I will not disappoint you today. So over the last few years, when I'm creating these courses, I learned that it's not about those cultural pieces in there. It's not about the religious pieces. I don't need to teach people on all the different religious practices and all the different cultural practices, because what it comes down to is end-of-life experiences are very personalized. And I believe our role as a doula is to ensure that people have a choice so that they can have self-determined end-of-life care. One of our past instructors from the end-of-life doula program, Denise Sigwin-Horth, she used to start one of her slideshows with a picture of a canvas, and she would say that this is not our canvas. It's kind of like I use the imagery or the example of being a travel agent. You know, we're helping them to know what their options are and what they can and can't do, but we're not getting on the plane with them. So, so I think we've all seen what happens when things are out of whack, when people are at the end of their life. We've seen when doctors or families and patients or clients' values are not aligned. It can be quite traumatic. It can be quite morally distressing. And that is what led me to do my master's thesis on focusing on goals of patients, families, and physicians when death is expected, and how to relieve some of the tensions there when the goals don't align. And to help align the goals, my thesis statement was to adopt an interdisciplinary approach to end-of-life care that considers all disciplines, and more, the ones that are relevant, such as medicine and social sciences and humanities. So kind of like this psychosocial humanistic approach to end-of-life care that would increase in interdisciplinary humility. Humility is my favorite word, just to let you know. And I believe by doing that, we will change the landscape of death, kind of take it back from this medical event that usually happens. And that's because that's what we're taught to, that's what's in our brains, that's socially in us. We call 911. But to take it take it and make it more of a personalized experience. So my goal of my dissertation was to reduce moral distress and reshape end-of-life care. And just why is because death is never just a medical event. So I want to introduce that integrating an end-of-life doula pedagogy and curriculum into medical programs. I'm not going to say specifically physicians. I think that it could be very broad. And just even listening to the last, the panel discussion, we were talking about, I think Megan was saying something like, I just want everybody to do this practice. And that's the same as me. Like, and I'm sorry if I ruffle any feathers, but I would love a world where we don't need end-of-life doulas, and that people, this is just the way it is, and this is just the way things happen. So that is my own personal belief there. But I think that if we put these pedagogical approaches and the curriculum of end-of-life doulas into all medical education, I think that that can be a good systematic response to misaligned goals of care and poor end-of-life experiences. So kind of what that looks like to me is taking this biomedical, psychosocial, humanistic, and ethical approach and that is how it, well, at least in the program that I teach and at Douglas College in the programs that I write, is that is what makes up the end-of-life approach. Doulas know medically what is going to happen to the body. Not perfectly, but we have some sort of idea of what end-of-life kind of looks like. We know the social parts of it, the fear around talking about death, and the belief that we need to beat death, and it's something that we can overcome. Well, as far as I know, nobody has, except for maybe Jesus if you're Catholic or a Christian, but that is not something that is going to happen. And then from a humanistic side, and looking at how culture and tradition shape our lens on end of life, all of these things need to be considered. We can't look at end of life care from one lens, or it's going to be skewed. You're not going to get the full picture. Some people call this holistic. I call it interdisciplinary humility. So different names for different things that mean the same. But if we look at it from one lens, so say, we've got these three silos, and you look at it from this way. So medical education, the biomedical standpoint is the goal of care is to relieve suffering and avoid premature death. That is it. They use a reductionist framework to create, the evidence-based best practice, what we do in this situation. Well, that often overlooks maintaining quality of life to get an extension of life. And in my experience, physicians want to do what's best for their patients. They really do. My other job is I'm the manager of continuing education for the physicians in the Kootenay Boundary area. So I manage educational programming for about 300 doctors here. And I hear from them. They want more palliative care training. They want more time with their patients. They want to do a good job. What happens is they simply don't have time. It's not that they don't want to. is that a lot of times they just don't have time, and a lot of them aren't comfortable with it, and they just don't even know how to say, well, this is what's actually happening, you know. So that's looking at it just from a biomedical goal. Like, they want to save lives. That is their goal. And then we have the psychosocial part, like I said before, is that we have, you know, media that influences how we look at death, you know, death denial, the fear of death, and the discomfort of talking about death. That is still so prevalent. So, I mean, doulas, end of life doulas, we already have this double-edged sword, is that we want to do this, but people, we know that people would benefit from us, but how do you get them to talk about it? How do you get them in there? How do you start those conversations? How do you tell them about dualism and the good that we can do? So there's that for sure. And then if we look at it from like a humanities and ethical piece, or the cultural, you look at the, you know, the cultural and religious and the tradition piece, we know that influences where people want to die. You know, in some of the programs that I've written for Indigenous folks, they don't want any material on medical assistance in dying. You know, and others do, and some people in their communities want to know about this, but it's restricted because an elder said, actually, that's not our belief system, so we're not going to include that. So really, like, just going back to wrap that piece up, is that all of these perspectives are important. We need them all. We need the actual reality of what's happening with the body. We need to understand why we believe the things we do, and we need to know what shapes clients, patients, whatever you want to call them. We want to know what shapes their values and their beliefs and the decisions that they make. And we want to take that all and make it obtainable, that they get to make a choice after thinking about those all that thing. So for me, this is where this interdisciplinary humility approach becomes essential. And it's really just a mindset that no one knows. Well, not no one knows, I guess. It's recognizing the limits of your own knowledge while you're working across multiple disciplines. I heard, you know, sociologists yesterday. My undergrad was in sociology and gerontology. My master's is in interdisciplinary studies. So it's really, you know, looking at all of the different disciplines and coming to find some common ground, and acknowledge that, you know, we're talking about using a Delphi study yesterday. Well, Delphi studies don't work in some disciplines and they do in some, but you can mix and match, which I love, different approaches to research when you do an interdisciplinary kind of lens on there. So acknowledging that no one discipline has the answer to complex problems. So that, and I think end of life care is very complex. It's a complex problem. We want to respect other values. Like, yes, we cannot consider the care that we give as doulas for our clients just from a cultural piece. You can pretend to be blind to what's actually medically happening, but we really can't. I was hearing someone even saying in the discussion that, you know, we like to take people down to the water when they're dying if that's their last wish. I've done that myself. I've taken people for their last smoke, gotten in trouble at work for that. You know, I've taken people outside, taken people to the beach, taken people to the forest, taken a lady or arranging for a lady to go to a beautiful waterfall during COVID, where it was her favorite place to be, and have her assisted death there. Medically, those things would have been stopped if that wasn't medically sound for somebody to help with those things. So sometimes we just can't turn a blind eye. And then the medical field doesn't want to turn a blind eye to culture and tradition and the realities of what's going on to somebody mentally during this time either. So really just thinking about it from all the different disciplines. The interdisciplinary perspective also is someone, when you're looking at it, is being open to questioning assumptions. I love questioning assumptions, and changing ways of thinking. And just putting education to people's assumptions. Like, actually, you can do this. People, that's one of the things that I hear all the time when I'm working with families is that, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Absolutely. Absolutely, you can. So we're encouraging curiosity, empathy, flexibility, and fostering collaboration. And to me, that really does sound like what we do as end-of-life doulas. We're curious. We ask those curious questions. We're empathetic. We have humility. We're flexible. So thinking about those things is really important. And that's why I pose the idea of taking this end-of-life doula education that we have and putting it into medical education. Just gonna switch slides. There are some barriers to this and some things that we do need to work on, and some of them came up in the last few conversations. But medical education, end-of-life care is still an elective. So not only am I asking these, medical education institutes to make end-of-life care a standard course in their programs, but I'm asking them to make end-of-life doula care or their approach standard in their programs. In teaching over the last 9 years now through Douglas College, we have had so many physicians and nurses and social workers and even ultrasound techs and people who are in the medical field who want more. So let's give them more. They're coming to end-of-life doula programs to get more education on how to support somebody at the end of their life. So that's one. So let's make that not a barrier. Let's get that into curriculum in medical school. The second one, and I'll just go back a slide, is that I find that there is a problem with best practice. And one place where I find that there is a problem with best practice is always defaulting to the palliative approach to care. So what I'm saying here is, yeah, I love the palliative approach to care. It's such a promising practice. It is fantastic. It has really shaped and shifted the way that care is given at the end of life. However, it's that not everybody wants palliative care. Like Lucy, you said earlier, some people want to die alone. That's their last piece of agency. And I totally agree with that. Now, the doula approach would maybe, or people might think, or even the families might think, oh, I don't want to leave for that 5 minutes. I don't want to leave them alone at the end of their life. And there's some cultural pieces to that as well. There's some cultural pieces that say, hey, you're not leaving, at the end of life. But then somebody goes out for a coffee and they die. So they choose to die alone. Well, I feel the same way about palliative care in some regards. It is a great practice, but it's not always the best practice. I feel that some people want to go out with their boots on. That's what I call it. Some people want all medical attention. Some people want it right until their last moment. So it's really important to think about that when you're caring for somebody as a doula, is that, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do. Well, sometimes that's a little bit different. So the last problem that I find, or the barrier that we've come up across, is, it's been mentioned lots, end-of-life doulas are still babies. We're still in the baby infancy stage, and not everybody takes a profession that is not recognized or not regulated seriously. So, and I know that this is something that we're all working on. Do you want to be regulated? Do you not? I'm not going to get into that today, but it does create a barrier for sure. So the impact that I believe would happen if we took an end-of-life doula approach in end-of-life care would be great for not only the physicians, but also the patients. And I believe that I think I'm running out of time, so I'm just gonna keep going.
You have about five or 6 minutes, Jen.
Oh, awesome, great. So we see these impacts that integrating an end-of-life doula approach into education would have, but there's also more. I love hearing about the ripples and and the impact that we have. And I just want to, before I lose it, I just want to say good job for everybody who shows up with, as an end-of-life doula, because patients and families are witnessing what a doula can do, but also physicians and medical staff. They're open and they're right there watching that a patient comes in, if they're going to the hospital or if they're dying at home and there's nursing care or whatever. They see these people are prepared. These people have thought about things. These people have done the work, and they have family support, and they have, like Megan was talking about, the lady who had a baby born still, and everything was in order and everything was in place. What effect did that have on that medical team? What an impact that would have. So good job to everybody. And I'm going to put on my Douglas College hat for a second, if I can. Oh, it's too big though. That's all right. You get the drift. So we've created accessible, culturally informed, evidence-based education, and that's what I usually speak on, is how we keep growing and really striving for equitable care through programs at Douglas College. So building on that, we are now expanding the program to exclusively or inclusively include medical professionals to help them build interdisciplinary humility. Not teaching people how to support a person in this religion, this culture, this culture. We're teaching people how to show up, put their own stuff aside, reflect on their own beliefs and biases and assumptions, and really try to understand where a patient is coming from, so that we get that 3-layer kind of approach. And I think that this is a good move. There are, programs in Canada. It's called LEAP or Pallium, where their medical professional, they do end-of-life curriculum, end-of-life learning. But this is more of a staying in the, theme of interdisciplinary. This is for all of those people to come together in a space where they can talk about it. Maybe an ultrasound tech would say, I really hated that I really hate that somebody comes in and I can't do this or this because I'm not allowed to say what. Or the doctor says, well, my hands are tied. Why are people coming into the emergency room and not knowing that they're dying? One of the things that one of the doctors at the last palliative care education session that I provided said, I wish I could do more, but there isn't time in the emergency room. And that really did a switch in me, because I always thought doctors didn't have time or didn't want to. And I never always thought, but there was a piece of me that was like, I wish they put this in education. Well, this doctor had been educated. This doctor did want to do it. They just didn't have time to do it. I've seen patients that or clients that, the families are fighting in the hallway. I've seen older gentleman give CPR to his wife because that's what the ambulance driver told him to do when he called 911 when he panicked. It takes an emotional toll, not only on the family and the person who's dying, but the ambulance, the paramedics, the doctors, the staff that are watching. It really makes an impact on them. There's those ripples that continue. Through end-of-life doula work, I've witnessed some beautiful deaths. It's just that the impact that we can have as doulas to, create these spaces, these containers, where we look at all of the realities of what's physically going on, but we consider the social, the psycho, the mental, the cultural things that shape that as well. And all of these moments for me, that's my last slide. My email address was on there, but I'll put it in the chat. And I dislike the word good death, but I'm going to use it, that there is no single definition of good death. There is no best practice unless you're considering all of the different lenses that we can look at. And I know it seems like a big, that's too much. There's a checklist. Is there something to go on? No, what we always have to come back to is that it is their canvas and it is their story and it is their moment. And what we do as doulas and what we teach in doula education is that we need to self-reflect and remove ourselves from the picture. We need to model that for the family and for the healthcare workers, that let's make this so that this person gets the best end-of-life experience that they possibly can. And just to end, as doulas, I don't even know if you recognize or realize that we stand at this intersection of human experience. And when we bear witness and when we hold space and when we advocate through our work and how we're doing it and just showing up, what a profound effect that has on the families and the person's experience and the healthcare.